Hello there, welcome to Inkquiring Minds. My name is Doug and I'm back with another Pen Resurrection Sunday video. Today's video is about another Parker Vacumatic, but this one is very special. I borrowed this Parker Vacumatic pen and pencil set from my good friend Murray, and I'm going to restore it for him. It is a 1943 Parker Vacumatic pen and pencil set called a serviceman's set or a service set. This was made in Canada by Parker Canada, and this has the foil stamp Parker and the crest of the Royal Canadian Air Force with its motto, Per Ardva ad Astra, or through adversity to the stars, or through struggle to the stars, the motto of the Royal Canadian Air Force.
To infinity and beyond!
And some of the Commonwealth forces as well during World War II, and it was their motto right up to 1968 in Canada. These pen pencil sets were sold for servicemen, but they weren't exclusive to servicemen. You could buy them yourself as an ordinary citizen. It is in the Air Force blue leather pouch, and this was to accommodate the Armed Forces regulations of not having pens or pencils sticking out of your pocket.
It's a pledge pin, sir. A pledge pin on your uniform!
The flap of your pocket needs to fold over anything that's in the pocket and not reveal anything, and so these pen and pencil sets were packaged in a leather pouch that would made it easier for them to box up and kept them safer during travels. So we open the flap up and we see we have a lovely example of a 1943 Parker Vacumatic stacked celluloid Silver Pearl Vacumatic set. Here's the pen itself. It has silver hardware. This was another nod to the war effort. Previous to the war, Parker was gold filling over a brass substrate, but brass was needed for the war effort, so they started using silver. Unfortunately, the cap bands, there were two of them, are missing. But we can see on the barrel here the imprint, there it is, .3 which is the second quarter of 1943, Parker Vacumatic, made in Canada, and a registered patent number. Take the cap off and we see the nib, pretty typical Parker Vacumatic nib with the arrow. Can't see the imprint on it. I'm already getting some ink on my fingers. I had dipped this to see whether it would take any ink earlier. So there's a little water in it. We take off the blind cap and we see the vacuum pump, celluloid vacuum pump. This was another change in design to conserve on war materials, since the earlier vacuum pump filler was made almost completely of metal, mostly aluminum, and aluminum was needed for building aircraft and so forth. So they redesigned this to be a celluloid piece. And there is remnants of an old diaphragm in there, but it's all desiccated and old. So we're going to try to get that pump out of there and take the section off. The pen, yeah, it'll probably require some soaking or heating, but otherwise it's in excellent shape. So we'll polish that up and get out any old scratches and abrasions. The pencil also needs work. It's in the same beautiful silver pearl celluloid with the silver clip. The nose cone on this one is badly tarnished. The sleeve on this comes off, but unfortunately on this one it pulls the mechanism apart as well. And so there's the sleeve that goes over the mechanism with the eraser in the back. So this needs some repair. The nose cone comes off and we can pull the celluloid barrel off, and there's the mechanism. I've got a video that I just reran last Sunday that shows how to disassemble this worm gear kind of vacumatic pencil mechanism and how to repair it. I pulled that video up because of this pencil that needed some repair, and I needed to remind myself of how to do it. So we're going to look at cleaning that whole thing up and reaffixing the sleeve to the mechanism so that it doesn't pull off when you pull off the top cap. So that pencil is going to require work, but we're going to focus on the Vacumatic fountain pen first. So all these parts, save the mechanism of the pencil, are going into some pen flush to be cleaned up a little bit in my ultrasonic bath for a couple of minutes to 3 minutes, something like that, just to loosen things up. And then we'll try to get that section off and do some inspection of the inside of the barrel, and then we'll try to remove that pump and replace the diaphragm to make this pen work again. So I've got the pieces out of the bath, and that section still won't budge, so I'm going to have to give it a little bit of heat. My heat gun, gripper material, and give it a, oh, it's starting to budge. There we go. Just a lot of old ink. Yeah, all crusty. There's the section nib and feed. And I'll scrape all that old ink off of there. See if we can get the breather tube out. Yep, there it goes. Soak that as well, and then we'll try to knock that feed out of there and get the nib free. The clip loosened up as well. So use some gripper material here, the pencil in the cap, and lift that clip and give the jewel a turn. Yeah, it came out pretty easily. It looked like it was sitting a little bit high in there, and that clip was loose. Yeah, there's ink on that too. Aha. That's why there's ink on there. There's a hole in the cap seal. Yeah, that's supposed to be solid. So that cap seal has been perforated. And there's a little bit of a dent there as well. So it looks like someone over-cranked that jewel into that piece there and broke this piece off the bottom of the cap seal. So we might have to replace that, put it back in there with a little bit of glue to hold it in place. Yeah, it's pretty awful in there, so I'm going to soak all these parts again and not lose them. All this stuff is going back in the bath, and we can get at that clip now, that silver, and polish that up. And I've got good news on that front. There's the tip of the pencil. Remember how black it was? Well, a little bit of silver polish and a little bit of jeweler's cloth, and it looks almost brand new. You can still see the corrosion and the pitting on it, but it's now bright and silver. I polished the clip a little bit, but I haven't taken that jewel off of there. That one looks a little bit proud as well. Should actually sit down in there a little bit more. I'll take a look at that clip, see if it's loose. It looks a little bit loose. Yeah, there we go. We might have to take a look at that too. So I put a few drops of my Pensbury Manor Penetrate Potion number 7 inside the barrel and on the outside of the barrel where the vacuumatic threads are, and let it sit for about 4 or 5 hours. And then I heated and cooled and heated and cooled and cajoled and twisted, and it finally let loose. You can see all of that old desiccated diaphragm right there, and those threads all clogged up with what I can only assume is glue. Shellac. It's probably shellac, which makes it a pain to replace the diaphragm. But now it's out. I've got to clean that barrel out of all that remaining desiccated diaphragm and clean up that vacuum pump. Let's get it out of the collet here. And there we are. And it's functioning correctly. Just need to clean it up and get that pellet out of there. I'll use my Dremel tool to drill out that small pellet, and then we can replace the diaphragm with a new one. So it's the next day, and I've got good news and I've got bad news. The good news is I got the vac pump out of the barrel, and the barrel cleaned up nicely, and so did the pump, and the pump is in good working condition. That's all the good news. The bad news is that the threads are almost gone on this vac. Look at that. No threads. I've scraped them and scraped them and scraped them with my tool, thinking that it was just embedded glue in there. But that has been ground down to nothing. Here's what a normal vac pump looks like in terms of its threads. So you can see the diameter has been reduced, and the threads are almost gone. And the inside of the barrel, I've scraped that out as well, and there's a lot of residue, old diaphragm, and glue in there, and those threads are really awful. So I've got a couple of options. I can replace the vac pump, but these are the correct threads, and they will not go into that barrel because that barrel has been ground down as well, those threads. This will thread back in, but only catch the last couple of threads to tighten up. So I think my options are I either re-tap this and put a replacement vac pump in, and I don't have the right tap size for that. That's a no. Or I re-diaphragm this pump, put it back in the barrel with some shellac and tighten it down. And the pen will function as long as that diaphragm lives, which might be another 10 years. I don't know. It depends on the usage of this pen. But that looks like the option I need to have in order to make this pen work again. Of course, when it needs to be re-diaphragmed again, maybe 10, maybe 20 years from now, that vac pump will have to be heated to get it out of there again, but it is possible. Hopefully that shellac will seal that barrel from leaking, and it will work. So that's my course of action. I'm going to put a new diaphragm on this vac pump, and we're going to reintroduce it into this barrel with some shellac to seal it, and hopefully that'll make it work. And in order to put a new diaphragm in there, we have to get the old pellet out. I'm going to drill it out with my Dremel tool and very, very fine drill bit tip. There we go. Finally got it out. That was a tough one. But that ebonite receptacle is in excellent shape. The rest of it isn't. So I've got a well-talced diaphragm here on my pellet pusher tool. And there's a groove on there that marks it for length. Find that groove, make a mark, and cut it right there. We got the right length. And then we're going to push it into the pellet receptacle and hope it works. Seem to. Yep, worked perfectly. Now we'll see how long it takes to roll this cuff back on itself. I don't seem to get any better at this. The more I do it, the more it remains the same. Well, at least I got it started. I found that by pushing it back on itself, it's doubled up there right now, but you can use the pump to push it out the front and unkink it. I'm just going to get the last kink out. There we go. And pull it back just so it's right at that seam. There we go. So maybe I am learning how to do this after so many times. So now we've got to put a little silicone oil on the end of that cuff so it'll slide through into the barrel without kinking. And usually I put some silicone oil on those threads as well to make them thread nicely, but we're actually going to try to lock this down with some shellac. So we want one part to slip and the other part to hold fast. And we get my shellac pen out from the inky nib. There it is, my shellac pen. Dial up a little bit of shellac, and I'm just going to shellac the end of those threads. Put the collet on the pump. That'll help me get it into the barrel. There, that went in nicely. And we're going to tighten it down until it grabs those last couple of threads. And we'll just let that dry for several hours. And then we have to put the pen back together again and see whether it holds ink, draws up ink, and holds ink. That's the key. So here is the silver clip all polished up, looking almost brand new. Here it is compared to the clip on the pencil, which I was able to remove. And you can see the difference. The pencil isn't too bad actually, so I'm going to polish this up as well. But one thing I discovered when I removed the clip from the pencil, there's glue. That's why it was sitting up high, because someone had glued the jewel to hold the clip down. And I polished up the cap bands on the pencil as well. But now let's take the nib and section and knock out that feed. And there's our nib. And there is the imprint, same as the barrel, 2 dots and a 3. Second quarter of 1943. And those tines need to be aligned a little bit. This is an extra fine, very fine nib. So we'll polish that up and get it looking bright and new again. And we'll polish up the visible part of this feed as well and clean out the section. And here's the nib all polished up on my Dremel buffing tool and on some jeweler's polishing cloth. It looks gorgeous. And here we are with the feed all polished up with some polishing compound. And I rubbed up that tail of the feed so that there's a light powder of ebonite on there. It acts as a lubricant when I'm putting it back in the section. And here is the polished up nib and the cleaned out breather tube. So we're going to put the nib and the feed together, and we're going to put it back in the section just to dip test that nib. And if it's okay, we'll do a fill test. Now, I always forget to do this. Screw the section back into the pen first, gives it a little bit of grip, and then we're going to get some gripper material and hold the nib top and bottom like that. Find the sweet spot and then give it a push. Make sure it's aligned, and there we go. And we can put that breather tube back in, and I put a little bit of silicone grease. Maybe I'll put some more on those threads. And we'll put the blind cap back on, and we'll do a dip test to check out that nib to see how it writes. Get out some Waterman's 1943 Parker Vacumatic Silver Pearl. Now this is a very, very fine nib, so extra fine. It has a good amount of bounce to it as well. And there's quite a lot of feedback. I'm just going to check out that line with my Dominant Industry line width checker. I got this from Gold Spot Pens. Thank you, Tom. And it really is a 0.2 millimeter line, and it goes out to about 0.9, so quite a lot of flex. Not a flex nib, but quite a lot of bounce to it, as you can see. But the tines are aligned, but there's a lot of feedback. It's not what I'd call smooth. Now, extra fine nibs tend to be more feedbacky, if that's a word. But I'm going to polish this up a little bit with some 12,000 grit micro mesh. And if you're going to use micro mesh, you have to make sure that your tines are absolutely aligned, or you'll damage the nib. A little water on that 12,000. And we'll try it again. Well, that's much better. So now we'll get out the scale, measure the pen, empty, press tear, take off the blind cap and leave it on the scale. And we're going to check to see if this accepts ink and whether it leaks or not as well. I'm getting bubbles. And we're getting 0.81. Not a lot of ink, but it is functioning. Usually get between 1 and 1.3 milliliters of ink. And this is getting 0.8 milliliters of ink. Now, I'm going to let it sit vertically overnight to see whether that shellac seal works on that pump. In the meantime, I'm going to add some silicone oil to this worm gear on the pencil and get it nice and lubricated all the way up and down. Move those keys all the way to the back and then all the way back down to the front again. There we go. Now both keys are down the front, and there's that lead ejector from the second key. We'll work it all the way back again to make sure the entire mechanism is fully lubricated. Now the issue with this sleeve is that it gets pressed on to that knurled brass nut right there, but when it got pulled off, it split. This is what happened to the other one I repaired as well. And so there's that split right there. So I'm going to use some red Loctite on this knurled piece here, and we're going to fit that on so it doesn't get pulled off with the cap. You know, my colors mixed up. We're going to use the blue thread locker, which is medium strength, not the high strength stuff. It means we can probably still get it apart in the future. So just put a little drop on that knurled section right there, like that, and then press that on and wipe off the excess. Now that thread locker with the added knurling in that brass piece should hold that together. I'm going to leave that mechanism there to dry, let it dry for several hours while we polish up the barrel with the cap of the fountain pen, and the barrel and blind cap of the fountain pen as well. So we'll go at all of this with some micro mesh and polish it up like brand new. So I'm pleased to report there were no leaks in the back of this Vacumatic when it sat for hours and hours and hours upside down like that. And so I've emptied it out and I'm going to refill it. There's the blind cap and the pen. Press tear, refill it again, and try it again. That's more like it. 1.35 milliliters of ink. It's exactly what that should hold. So now we're going to go at the barrel and the cap of the fountain pen and the barrel and the cap of the pencil with some micro mesh, starting with 1500 grit and running up to 12,000 grit, and then finishing off with some Mirror Glaze number 9 Swirl Remover 2 polishing compound, and we'll see whether we can get some of those scratches out of that surface. And now we have everything polished up like brand new. Of course, those cap rings are missing, unfortunately, and that happens because celluloid shrinks over time and the metal doesn't, and they end up dropping off. Murray and I looked for the rings in the pouch to see maybe they dropped off inside this pouch, but they weren't there. And there's the barrel, blind cap, the imprint still there. There it is. And the pencil in perfect shape. But the cap ends are nice and shiny. They stayed on the pencil. And we've polished up the hardware, and the nib is ready to go back in the pen. Just going to add a little bit of silicone oil just to make sure there's a complete ink seal. I don't like to shellac these down. It makes it easier to clean the pen if you can take the section out. Now all we have to do is replace the hardware on both the pen and the pencil. I'm just going to check it to make sure it doesn't need adjustment, and it does need adjustment. You can see how it's bent outward slightly. So I'm just going to use some gripper material and my pliers and gently bend the clip inward slightly. Check it again. There, that's better. Now it's touching. Just going to add a little bit of white card under this so that it doesn't scratch the barrel that I've already carefully polished. And we're going to twist the top jewel and press it in with some gripper material, and then I'm just going to adjust it so that it is between the two breather holes and give it a good twist. Make sure it's nice and tight. Putting a pencil in the cap helps press down on that. Yep, nice and tight. And there, our fountain pen is done. And we'll do the same thing with the pencil. Check to make sure it doesn't need any adjustment. It looks like it's in good shape. Actually, with this one, it was glued down, so I'm going to scrape that little bit of, looks like crazy glue is on there to hold it in place, just to make sure it's flat. Just scrape out those threads a little bit. The dental pick, make sure there's no debris there. And there we go. And we can put them back in the pouch. And I'll come back and give you my thoughts on this restoration. So what are my thoughts about this resurrection? Well, first off, thanks go out to Murray for entrusting me with his vintage treasure. These Parker Serviceman's kits were only made in Canada and the UK as far as I know, and I would categorize this as a limited success. I was able to resurrect the fountain pen so that it actually works. It holds 1.3 milliliters of ink. The nib is in good shape. It's an excellent, extra fine, very fine nib. All of the hardware polished up beautifully. The silver clip Looks brand new. Unfortunately, the cap bands are missing. The barrel is nicely translucent. There you can see your ink levels. The hardware on the pencil, beautiful and silver. Cap rings are in good shape on this pencil. And the nose cone actually polished up nicer than I could have imagined. But there are some caveats here. Unfortunately, the vac pump on this pen was previously destroyed somehow. I did not destroy it when I took it out of the pen. It took a lot of heat to get it out, but there are no threads on that vac pump. The vac pump was glued in there with either shellac or some other kind of glue. It took a lot to get it out of there, and that's how I had to replace it. So I replaced the diaphragm, and it now works beautifully. It pumps up a lot of ink, but that's now permanently sealed. Well, semi-permanently sealed, because if it needs to be replaced again, that is shellac on there, and so it'll require some heat to get that out of there again. How many more times that will take it, I'm not sure. But I would consider this now in a fragile state. So I would recommend to Murray that he not screw this blind cap on very tight. Don't put any more torque on that vac pump with no threads on it than need be, and this pen will function fine. And it looks beautiful. The silver pearl is gorgeous. There was a serious issue with the pencil as well that you saw. The sleeve on this kept pulling out with pulling the cap off, which happens to this Vacumatic pencil quite frequently. I've seen it before. The previous one I restored had a split in the metal sheath that goes around the mechanism as well. I've now locked that down, but now the mechanism doesn't work quite as well as it should. It does hold a lead, but you have to take the cap off to crank the mechanism down. So again, this writing instrument has some issues, but it is functional. So I'm pleased the way this turned out, and I'll be pleased to return this Serviceman's pen and pencil set in a restored condition to my friend Murray. And there you have it. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and don't forget to ring that bell to get instant notifications whenever a new video is posted. And you can join as a member of my channel for only 99 cents a month, and I guarantee I'll answer your comments in the comment section, and you'll get cool emojis, badges, sneak peek unboxing videos, as well as instant access to my videos the moment I post them. And that just leaves it for me to say thank you for watching, and that's all she wrote.
I made this.